The wind howled through the pines surrounding the small town of Willow Creek, Montana, a place where the mountains loomed like silent guardians and the night stretched long and cold. At the edge of town sat the Willow Creek Animal Rescue, a modest shelter run by a handful of volunteers who'd seen their share of strays, cats with matted fur, dogs with haunted eyes, even the occasional raccoon that had wandered too far from the wild. But nothing could have prepared them for what showed up that frigid October evening. Jessica Harper, a 28-year-old volunteer with a knack for calming even the most skittish creatures, was locking up for the night. Her breath fogged in the crisp air as she fumbled with the keys, her mind already drifting to the warm couch waiting at home. That's when she heard it, a faint whimper, barely audible over the rustling leaves. She froze, her heart thudding. "Hello?" she called, her voice swallowed by the dark. The sound came again, closer this time, from the shadows near the shelter's front stoop. Jessica grabbed the flashlight from her backpack and swung the beam toward the noise. There, trembling in the glow, was a wolf pup. Its fur was a patchy mix of gray and brown, matted with mud, and its amber eyes glinted with something between fear and desperation. It couldn't have been more than a few months old, too young to be out here alone. "Hey, little guy," Jessica murmured, crouching low. She extended a hand, slow and steady, the way she'd learned in her years at the shelter. The pup didn't bolt. Instead, it took a shaky step forward and collapsed at her feet, its tiny chest heaving. Jessica scooped it up without a second thought, cradling it against her jacket. It weighed next to nothing, all bones and fur, and its whimpers tugged at something deep in her chest. Inside the shelter, under the harsh fluorescent lights, she got a better look. The pup's ribs pressed against its skin, and a faint scar ran across its left ear, jagged, like it had been torn rather than cut. "Where'd you come from, huh?" she whispered, stroking its head. It nuzzled into her palm, and for a moment, she forgot the late hour. The next morning, the shelter buzzed with curiosity. "A wolf pup? In Montana? Sure, but this close to town," said Tom, the grizzled manager who'd been running the place for 2 decades. He scratched his beard, peering into the kennel where the pup now lay on a blanket. "Looks half-starved. Probably got separated from its pack." "Maybe," Jessica replied, but something gnawed at her. Wolves didn't just wander into town, not like this. And those eyes, they held a weight she couldn't explain, like they'd seen more than a pup should. The real shock came later that day. Jessica was in the break room, sipping coffee, when she heard a scream from the play yard. She bolted outside, nearly spilling her mug, and found Lily, a teenage volunteer, clutching a little boy named Ethan, Tom's grandson, who often tagged along after school. Ethan's face was streaked with tears, and Lily's hand shook as she pointed to the pup, now pacing the fence line. He saved him," Lily stammered. Ethan climbed the fence, and the gate swung open. "I didn't see the delivery truck coming. That pup barked so loud, it stopped the driver just in time." Jessica stared at the wolf pup, its ears perked, its gaze locked on Ethan. The boy sniffled, reaching out a hand, and the pup pressed its nose to the chain link, letting out a soft whine. A chill ran down Jessica's spine. This wasn't just a stray. There was something more here, something she couldn't yet name. That night, as she drove home through the quiet streets, Jessica couldn't shake the image of those amber eyes. She didn't know it then, but that pup's arrival was about to unravel a mystery tied to Willow Creek's past, a secret buried deep in the mountains, waiting for someone brave enough to dig it up. The next few days at Willow Creek Animal Rescue felt like a whirlwind. Word of the wolf pup's heroics spread fast. Small towns like this thrived on stories, and by Wednesday, half the locals had stopped by to gawk at the little savior. Jessica didn't mind the attention at first. It brought in donations of kibble and old blankets. But the more she watched the pup, the more unsettled she became. Tom had confirmed it was a male, settled into a routine quickly. He'd eat his meals, nap in the corner of the kennel, and perk up whenever Ethan came by after school. The boy had taken to calling him Rusty, after the reddish tint in his fur when the sunlight hit it just right. "He's my guardian angel," Ethan declared, pressing his face to the kennel bars. Jessica smiled at that, but her gut told her Rusty was more than a lucky stray. It started with the scar. She'd noticed it that first night, but under the shelter's bright lights, it looked deliberate. Not a tear from a fight, but a clean, curved line, almost like a symbol. She snapped a photo with her phone and showed it to Tom. "Ever seen anything like this?" she asked, zooming in on the faint mark. Tom squinted, then shook his head. "Could be anything, barbed wire, a branch. Wolves get banged up out there." But his voice lacked conviction, and Jessica caught the flicker of doubt in his eyes. That night, she couldn't sleep. She sat at her kitchen table, a mug of chamomile tea growing cold beside her, scrolling through wildlife forums on her laptop. Nothing matched the scar, not wolf pack markings, not injuries from traps. On a whim, she posted the photo to a local Montana hikers group, captioning it, "Found this little guy near Willow Creek. Anyone recognize this mark?" She hit send and leaned back, rubbing her eyes. The reply came at 2 a.m. Her phone buzzed, jolting her awake from a doze. It was a private message from a user named MTTracker82. "That's no accident. Meet me tomorrow, noon, at the diner on Route 12. Bring the pic." No name, no details, just an address pinned to a map. Jessica's pulse quickened. She typed a quick, "Who are you?" but got no response. The next day, she told Tom she was running errands and drove to the diner, a weathered joint called Rusty's Roadhouse. Ironic, she thought. Inside, the air smelled of fried grease and coffee. A man in a faded flannel jacket waved her over from a corner booth. He was older, maybe 50, with a scruffy beard and sharp blue eyes that sized her up as she slid into the seat. "You're the one with the wolf pup," he said, skipping pleasantries. His voice was gravelly, like he'd smoked one too many cigarettes. "Name's Cal. Used to track wildlife for the Forest Service." Jessica nodded, pulling out her phone to show him the photo. "This mark, what is it?" Cal leaned in, his fingers tracing the scar's curve on the screen. "Seen it before. Not on a wolf, though, on a dog, years back. Belonged to a guy named Elias Reed. Lived up in the Bitterroot Range, off-grid. Branded all his animals with that symbol, a half-moon with a slash. Said it kept him safe." "Safe from what?" Jessica asked, her mouth dry. Cal's eyes darkened. "Dunno. Elias was a recluse, crazy, some said. Disappeared about 10 years ago after a big fire up there. Folks thought he died, but no body was ever found." He tapped the phone. "If that pup's got his mark, it's no coincidence it showed up here." Jessica's mind raced. A branded wolf pup, a missing man, a fire, none of it made sense yet. Why would it come to the shelter? And how'd it save Ethan? Cal shrugged. Wolves are smart. Maybe it was looking for something or someone. He slid a folded napkin across the table. "That's the last place Elias was seen. Old cabin site. Check it out if you're brave enough." Back at the shelter, Jessica couldn't focus. Rusty watched her from his kennel, his amber eyes steady, almost expectant. She knelt beside him, running her fingers over the scar. "What are you trying to tell me, huh?" she whispered. The pup licked her hand, and for a moment, she swore she saw a spark of recognition in his gaze. She didn't tell Tom about Cal, not yet. But as the sun dipped below the mountains, casting long shadows over Willow Creek, Jessica knew she couldn't let this go. Whatever Rusty's story was, it started in those hills, and she was going to find out. Saturday morning broke cold and gray over Willow Creek, the kind of day that made you want to stay under the covers. But Jessica was already up, lacing her hiking boots and stuffing a backpack with water, a flashlight, and the napkin Cal had given her. The scribbled coordinates pointed to a spot deep in the Bitterroot Range, about an hour's drive and a 2-hour hike from town. She told Tom she was taking a personal day, half true, and left Rusty in Lily's care with a quiet promise to the pup. "I'll figure this out." The drive up Highway 93 was quiet, the road flanked by towering pines and the occasional deer darting into the brush. Jessica's mind churned with questions. Who was Elias Reed? Why brand a wolf pup? And how had Rusty ended up at the shelter, saving Ethan like some kind of furry guardian angel? The pieces didn't fit, not yet. She parked at a trailhead marked by a faded sign and started the trek, her boots crunching on pine needles. The air grew thinner as she climbed, her breath puffing in little clouds. The coordinates led her off the main path, through a tangle of undergrowth, until she stumbled into a clearing. There it was, the remnants of a cabin. Charred beams jutted from the ground like broken bones, and a rusted stovepipe leaned against a crumbling stone chimney. Time and weather had reclaimed most of it, but the fire scars lingered. Jessica pulled out her phone, no signal, of course, and snapped photos of the ruins. She circled the site, her eyes scanning for anything that might connect to Rusty. That's when she saw it, a glint of metal half buried under a fallen log. She knelt, brushing away dirt, and unearthed a small, tarnished pendant. It was shaped like a half-moon with a slash through it, identical to Rusty's scar. Her heart skipped. "Elias," she muttered, turning it over. On the back, faintly etched, were the initials ER. She tucked the pendant into her pocket and kept searching. Near the chimney, she found a trapdoor, its edges warped but intact. With a grunt, she pried it open, revealing a shallow cellar. The beam of her flashlight swept over dusty shelves, canned goods long expired, a cracked lantern, and a leather journal, its cover singed but legible. She grabbed it, her hands trembling, and flipped it open. The pages were filled with tight, slanted handwriting. Dates stretched back over a decade, chronicling Elias Reed's life in the mountains. He wrote of training dogs and wolves, calling them sentinels for something he never named. One entry, dated March 2015, caught her eye. The pack's growing. Mark the run today, half moon, like the others. If they come, he'll know what to do. Below it, a sketch of the symbol. Whose are they? Jessica whispered, her voice echoing in the cellar. The next pages grew frantic, mentions of lights in the trees, shadows moving too fast, and a final entry. Fire's coming. They found me. The pups are my only hope now. That was it. The rest was blank. She climbed out, journal in hand, her mind reeling. Elias had been running from something or someone. Had he set the fire himself? And how had Rusty, a pup born years later, ended up with his mark? She needed answers, but the woods felt suddenly oppressive, the shadows too deep. A twig snapped behind her, and she spun, flashlight raised. Nothing, just a squirrel skittering up a tree. Still, her skin prickled. Back at the shelter, she showed the journal to Cal, who'd agreed to meet her there. He skimmed it, his jaw tightening. Elias always talked about protectors, he said. Thought the wolves could sense things we couldn't. I figured it was paranoia, guy lived alone too long. But this, he tapped the pendant she'd laid on the table. This means something kept his work going after he was gone. Like what? Jessica pressed. Dunno. But that pup ain't random. He's tied to Elias, and whatever chased him out of these hills. That night, Jessica sat with Rusty in the kennel, the journal open beside her. The pup curled against her leg, his warmth steadying her racing thoughts. She traced the scar on his ear, matching it to the pendant in her pocket. You're a little mystery, aren't you? She said softly. Rusty's eyes met hers, calm and knowing, and she felt a pang of certainty. He'd come to Willow Creek for a reason. But the bigger question loomed. What had Elias feared, and was it still out there? As she locked up, a distant howl echoed from the mountains, sharp and mournful. Jessica shivered, glancing back at Rusty. His ears twitched, but he didn't stir. Whatever was coming, she'd face it with him. The next week passed in a blur of unease. Jessica couldn't shake the howl she'd heard, nor the weight of Elias's journal in her backpack. She kept it close, rereading passages late into the night, searching for clues. The shelter carried on as usual, dogs barked, cats napped, but Rusty's presence felt like a quiet storm brewing. He'd watch her with those amber eyes, patient yet urgent, as if waiting for her to catch up. Kel became a regular visitor, trading theories over coffee in the break room. Elias wasn't just some hermit, he said one afternoon, tapping the journal. He was on to something big. Those lights in the trees he wrote about? I've heard stories from old-timers. Strange stuff up in the Bitterroot, folks going missing, equipment fried for no reason. Most chalked it up to bears or bad luck, but Elias thought different. You think he was right? Jessica asked, cradling a mug. Outside, snow flurries dusted the ground, the first hint of winter. Cal shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe you lost it up there. Either way, that pup's a link. You don't mark an animal like that unless it's special. Special. The word stuck with her. Rusty had saved Ethan. After all, instinct alone couldn't explain that. She started watching him closer, noting how he'd pace the kennel at dusk, ears twitching at sounds no one else heard. Once, she caught him scratching at the floor, his claws digging into the concrete like he was searching for something buried. Then came Thursday night. Jessica was alone, finishing paperwork, when the power flickered. The shelter plunged into darkness, then hummed back to life. She frowned, storms weren't forecast. A low growl rumbled from Rusty's kennel. She grabbed her flashlight and hurried over. The pup stood rigid, hackles raised, staring at the window. Outside, the pines swayed, but the wind was still. Easy, boy, she murmured, kneeling beside him. That's when she saw it, a flash of light, quick and sharp, cutting through the trees beyond the fence. Not lightning, not a car headlight, something deliberate, like a signal. Rusty's growl deepened, and Jessica's stomach twisted. She fumbled for her phone and texted Cal, something's out there. Come quick. Minutes later, headlights swept the lot as Cal's truck roared in. He jumped out, a rifle slung over his shoulder. What did you see? He demanded. Lights like Elias wrote about, she said, pointing. Rusty sensed it first. Cal scanned the woods, his breath fogging in the cold. Stay here. I'll check it out. Before she could argue, he was gone, swallowed by the shadows. Jessica waited, clutching Rusty's leash. The pup pressed against her, trembling but alert. 10 minutes stretched into 20. Just as she reached for her phone to call Tom, a gunshot cracked through the night. She gasped, yanking the door open. "Cal," she shouted, her voice raw. He stumbled back into the lot, his face pale, rifle dangling. "Something's moving out there," he panted. Too fast, couldn't get a clear shot. "But I found this." He held up a small metal tag, dented and scratched, with the half-moon symbol etched into it. Was nailed to a tree, fresh. "Someone's been watching us." Jessica's blood ran cold. "Watching us? Why?" "Dunno. But it's tied to Elias and that pup." Cal glanced at Rusty, who'd gone silent, his eyes locked on the woods. "We need help. I know a guy, ex-Forest Service, like me. He's seen weird stuff up there. I'll call him tomorrow." Sleep didn't come that night. Jessica stayed at the shelter, Rusty curled beside her on a cot. She kept the journal open, rereading Elias's last words. "The pups are my only hope." Had he trained them for this, whatever this was? And why now, 10 years later? At dawn, Cal returned with his contact, a wiry man named Hank with a limp and a no-nonsense stare. He studied Rusty, then the journal, his jaw tight. "Elias wasn't crazy," Hank said finally. "He was part of a project, off the books, government stuff. Wolves bred for surveillance, tracking, protection. Something went wrong, and they torched the site to cover it up. Thought it was all gone, till now." "Surveillance," Jessica echoed. "You're saying Rusty's some kind of experiment?" "Maybe a descendant," Hank replied. "That marks a tracker, old tech, but it works. Someone's still out there, looking for what Elias left behind." Before she could process it, Rusty bolted upright, barking furiously. Outside, tires crunched gravel, a black SUV with tinted windows idling in the lot. The driver's door opened, and a figure in a dark coat stepped out, face shadowed. Jessica's heart pounded. Whoever they were, they'd found her and Rusty. The air in the shelter lot felt electric as the figure stepped closer, boots crunching on the gravel. Jessica gripped Rusty's leash, her pulse hammering. The pup's bark softened into a low growl, his body tense against her leg. Cal raised his rifle, and Hank edged forward, hand on a holstered pistol. "Who are you?" Jessica called, her voice steadier than she felt. The stranger stopped, hands raised. Under the dim glow of the shelter's floodlight, she saw a woman, mid-40s, sharp features framed by dark hair streaked with gray. Her coat bore no insignia, but her posture screamed authority. "Lower the weapons," she said, her tone calm but firm. "I'm not here to hurt you. My name's Dr. Mara Ellis. I worked with Elias Reed." Jessica exchanged a glance with Cal, who didn't budge. "Worked with him on what?" she demanded. "And why are you here now?" Mara's eyes flicked to Rusty, softening for a moment. "That pup's the last of his line, a line Elias and I created. Can we talk inside? It's a long story, and I'd rather not freeze while telling it." Against Cal's grumbling, they moved to the break room. Mara sat, hands folded, while Rusty settled at Jessica's feet, watching the stranger with wary curiosity. 10 years ago, Mara began, Elias and I were part of a DARPA project, top secret, experimental. We bred wolves with enhanced instincts, embedded trackers to monitor remote areas. They were meant to protect soldiers, bases, civilians. Elias called them sentinels. Hank nodded grimly. "Told you government stuff." "The project failed," Mara continued. "Or so they thought. The wolves were too independent, too unpredictable. When funding dried up, the site was shut down, burned to erase evidence. Elias refused to abandon them. He took a pack and vanished into the Bitterroot. I thought he'd died, until I picked up a signal last month. That pup's tracker activated." Jessica touched the scar on Rusty's ear, the half-moon mark. "This?" Mara nodded. "Old tech, but it still works. It led me here. Someone else must have caught the signal too, probably ex-contractors looking to salvage the project. That's who's been watching you." "The lights, the tag on the tree," Cal muttered. "They're closing in." "Not anymore," Mara said, pulling a device from her pocket. A small black box with blinking lights. "I jammed the signal an hour ago. They'll move on when they realize it's dead." She looked at Jessica. "But that pup, he's more than tech. Elias trained them to choose who to protect. He saved that boy, didn't he?" Jessica nodded, her throat tight. "Ethan, he stopped a truck from hitting him." Mara smiled faintly. Then Elias's work wasn't for nothing. The room fell silent. Outside, the snow thickened, blanketing Willow Creek in quiet. Jessica's mind raced. Rusty wasn't just a stray or an experiment. He was a legacy, A guardian born from a man's desperate hope. But what now? I'll take him, Mara offered. Study him, keep him safe. He's valuable. No. Jessica cut in, sharper than she meant. She knelt beside Rusty, his warmth grounding her. He belongs here. With us. He chose us. Ethan's laughter echoed in her memory, the way Rusty's eyes lit up when the boy ran to him. This wasn't a lab animal, it was family. Mara studied her, then nodded. Fair enough. I'll make sure the signal stays dead. You won't see me, or them, again. She stood, pausing at the door. Elias would have liked you. He believed in second chances. She left, her SUV fading into the storm. Cal and Hank exhaled, the tension breaking. Well, that's that, Cal said, slinging his rifle over his shoulder. Crazy bastard was a hero after all. Jessica didn't reply. She sat with Rusty, the journal open on her lap, its final words glowing in her mind. The pups are my only hope. Maybe Elias hadn't meant hope for himself, but for others, for Ethan, for her, for a town that needed a protector it didn't know it had. Weeks later, life settled. Rusty grew stronger, his coat filling out, his scar a quiet badge of his past. Ethan adopted him officially, with Tom's gruff blessing, and the shelter buzzed with a new energy. Jessica watched them play in the snow one afternoon, Rusty bounding after a giggling Ethan, and felt a lump in her throat. She'd come to Willow Creek looking for purpose, a way to mend the cracks in her own life. She hadn't expected a wolf pup to show her how. Sometimes, she thought, the smallest souls carry the biggest stories. Rusty wasn't just a survivor, he was a reminder that courage doesn't need a voice, only a heart. And as the mountains stood watch over them, silent and eternal, Jessica knew Elias's hope had found its home.